If you're living with a secret life related to pornography addiction, you already know the heavy weight of that shadow. But what many people don't realize is that the shadow is often what is causing the most damage to the relationship, beyond just the behavior itself. The shadow of lies, secrecy, and deception. And today we're talking about the formal disclosure process, which is the structured clinical way that we bring everything out into the light to stop the bleeding and finally begin to heal.
It's a process that can feel incredibly intimidating for everyone involved, but it is truly the only way to end the cycle of trickle truth that keeps so many couples stuck in this trauma loop for months or years. We also want to be clear about what should and should not be shared, so please stick around for that. Some disclosure can cause far more harm than good. So when we say full disclosure, we mean a complete disclosure of everything that should be shared, not everything that could be shared.
Yes. Yeah. To start us off, Verlynda, we really need to define what we mean by formal disclosure. This isn't just a late night confession or a heated confrontation where things start to slip out. That's not what we're talking about here, just in case you're very new to the term. A formal disclosure is a prepared and well-structured clinical intervention. It's a therapist-guided process where the person struggling with addiction provides a complete and truthful account that they've spent time preparing and working on with to the spouse.
I think the word guided here is really important because when things are unguided, they often turn into what we call like a data dump, or a discovery where the partner finds something and then the addict reacts. So why is the clinical structure so vital here?
Yeah. Well, without structure, we lack safety and boundaries around this thing. Like, how do you know when you're safe to share, or how do you know that enough has been shared so that the spouse who's been betrayed can begin to feel safe again, because they've got everything that they need to know, for example? So the goal of this process is to end secrecy and to establish a shared reality, a new, genuine baseline of honesty for the relationship. When a couple has been living with addiction, they are essentially living in two different worlds. The addict has their secret world and the partner has the world they thought that they were living in. So disclosure merges those worlds so that the couple can finally stand on the same foundation of what has been going on in the relationship the whole time, usually. But we have to do that without causing additional trauma beyond what has just been traumatizing, but discovering that the secret life existed, which is why we follow very specific protocols to do this work.
So you mentioned trickle truth at the start, and I know that's things that a lot of our clients struggle with, probably even more than anything else, actually. But I'm wondering if you can unpack why revealing the truth in small pieces is so destructive to the healing process.
Yeah. Well, trickle truth is a primary barrier to reconciliation. So let me try to talk about that a little bit. We call this also, like in our work, we call it staggered disclosure. So think of it like a physical wound. If you have a deep cut and it starts to scab over, but then someone comes along and pulls the scab off the healing process, it has to start all over again from day one. And if it's staggered or trickle truthing, that keeps getting torn off. So in betrayal trauma, every time a new detail comes out weeks, months, or even years after the initial discovery, it resets that trauma clock. It restarts the healing on that wound.
And that's not just like a minor setback.
No.
This reset. So it reinforces the idea that the person still isn't safe, that the addict is still lying. Like, it really sets the recovery counter back to zero, every time.
It does. Yeah, and research shows that about 78% of betrayed partners cite trickle truth as the single biggest reason why they feel like they can't move forward. So it's very common, unfortunately. It keeps the partner in a state of constant hypervigilance. And the thing is, if you say, okay, and that's all now, and that's all now, and that's all now, and that's all now, when...
They're never going to believe that it's all.
No.
Yeah.
No. So you can't trust the conclusion.
Yeah.
Is in place.
Yeah.
Ever. It keeps the partner wound up in that sense. So they're always waiting for that next shoe to drop. Whereas formal disclosure, while that might seem frightening because it's like a singular sort of massive event, it's designed to be comprehensive, one time, and like a revelation of what needs to be known. We want to get everything on the table so that we can stop the scabs from being pulled off over and over and over and let the real work of reconstruction begin. And for the record, I mean, that could look like the reconstruction towards a rebuilt marriage, or a reconstruction toward ending the relationship and building a healthy single life. Like this doesn't always come back to togetherness. But agency, by telling the truth, agency has to get put back on the table so people can make choices.
Right. Yeah.
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 Yeah. So disclosure is not something a couple should try to do on their own.
Not formal disclosure, that's for sure. Inevitably, there's been some disclosure or discovery that's happened usually by the time they come to our office.
Right.
Like a formal disclosure process needs assistance, professional assistance.
Right. And I mean, you talk even about like just a generalized therapist as well. So why is it important that you have like specialized, separate therapists?
Yeah. So let me put it this way. It's absolutely essential. For sex addiction, in that case, I definitely recommend working with a certified sex addiction therapist or a CSAT. For porn addiction, the disclosure is much smaller, even though this might still be a very painful topic for the couple. And it's much less complex than a full-blown sex addiction, but you still want someone familiar with the disclosure process, or at least someone who's been supervised or has access to a CSAT that can teach them about it. Disclosures aren't taught in counseling school, in master's programs.
No.
These are postgraduate trainings that you take to learn about this. Now, the person in recovery, the addict, needs their own therapist to help them navigate their shame, because that is going to get activated during disclosure. And also to help them ensure that they are being 100% thorough in their document, their disclosure document. And typically we want to see at least 90 days of sobriety before a formal disclosure happens, so we know that the brain is starting to clear, that the commitment is real, and there's been time for a splitting that we talked about 2 videos ago, or compartmentalization to be eliminated so that the addict has full access to all of their memories as well.
Mm-hmm. So then you're saying the partner won't get any information for 90 days?
Well, not quite.
Because that'd be a long wait.
It is. And this is like, there's always some tension in this, okay? But they are owed like a basic level of detail so that they can decide, for example, if it's been physical acting out, do I need to see a doctor for my physical health? Like if I had sex with you while you were having sex with other people, that is a health implication for me. They need time to build support around themselves for the disclosure event and things like that. So there needs to be some level, but where it gets difficult is in betrayal trauma. Like you want to ask all the questions and find the answers, which is super because you're trying to close the loop on this trauma in your brain. So sometimes the trickle truthing can be driven by the traumatic reactions of the betrayed partner.
Yeah, like the demands.
Yeah. And that's gonna, I think what I want to say is like, I totally get why you're doing that, and that's going to be more harmful for you than if you can just hold the space of, okay, and knowing that there's stuff coming and I have the essential details of what happened, but I need to wait for this to formally occur once so that I don't rip my own scab off over and over. Other times it's entirely on the addict for like, they're trying to minimize the damage or contain the information. So, cause they don't want their partner to get hurt maybe, or something like that. So they trickle it out.
Right.
Because they think if they see all of me all at once, I'm a dead man for sure. So to speak, that being like the end of the relationship or
rejection,
total loss of respect, rejection, whatever that might mean. So that can happen too, but that's a self-protective measure that's ultimately harmful for the relationship and may end up injuring it beyond repair. So we don't recommend that either.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a lot going on here. But the addict, like, we want folks to understand the addict has done so much compartmentalizing. They need a timeline in place to get all of their memories out of all the boxes that they've stored them in into one cohesive timeline. And if you rush that work, you end up trickle truthing and you do more than one formal or full disclosure, which means it wasn't really a full disclosure. So yeah, there's tension, but there's best if the frame can be upheld so there's time to prepare both people for it.
Right, right. And then the betrayed partner needs their own specialist as well, like someone who understands betrayal trauma and isn't going to accidentally pathologize their traumatic reaction to the pornography.
Yeah, yeah. And that's such a huge point that we want you to hear too. The partner's therapist is there to protect them and prepare them for what they're about to hear. They help create a safety plan for the aftermath, tools for being grounded while you're receiving the information. Having separate therapists prevents those old codependency dynamics or trauma bonds from interfering with the truth and how that needs to come out and be heard. It allows each person to have a dedicated advocate who's focused solely on their individual needs. Like you need someone in your corner. It's a very high stakes event. And yeah, you definitely don't want someone who's just going to tell you that all men do this and you shouldn't be so upset or something like that. That's a horrible thing to have happen during this process. It needs to be someone who understands betrayal and what it's like to receive a disclosure, even for like just pornography.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think this is important. I remember speaking to a woman one time who sat through like an hour and a half of disclosure, didn't even know what she was walking into. And then at the end, his therapist said to her, okay, now it's your turn to forgive.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
And she had no support.
Yeah.
Like.
Yeah. You got to have the therapist for both people.
Yeah. Yeah. So before we get into the actual checklist here, I think it's helpful to clarify what we're actually disclosing. So pornography addiction is more than just occasional R-rated movies, although those are pornographic. So what are the signs then, Caleb, can you share with us about like when it's crossed into like a compulsion, a clinical compulsion?
So we look for a few key markers. The first is a loss of control, compulsivity, right? And if you're a porn addict listening to this or thinking you might be a porn addict, if you tried to stop or cut back multiple times and failed, that's a definite flag that there's something compulsive going on here, that this is probably an addiction. And then there's also escalation is another one. You find that you need more extreme content or more frequent sessions or to look at it longer to get the same hit of dopamine. Like any other drug where the tolerance builds up, it does for this as well. So that's another evidence that this is a compulsive addictive behavior.
And then there's the real world impact, like how it bleeds over into the rest of life.
Yeah. So think about preoccupation, for example. That's a good third one to watch for. If you're sitting at work or at dinner and you're thinking about when you can get away to your device, that's a problem. We see people often in this addiction neglecting responsibilities, pulling away from their partners emotionally, or just like losing track of hobbies and friends and stuff like that. In more severe situations, physical symptoms like porn-induced erectile dysfunction, where the brain has become so desensitized to real-life intimacy that it can only respond to the hyperstimulation of the screen. That's another one, too, that tells you that this is a problem where we need to have a proper disclosure process.
So speaking of the hyperstimulation of what is seen on screen, like how do we decide what goes into the disclosure, what stays out, what's the balance even between like what the partner needs to know and what's just going to traumatize them further?
Yeah, so let me give us a term here. We want to talk about information for agency, okay?
Okay.
Information for agency. That's anything the partner needs to know to understand the reality of their own life and make an informed decision about their future. So if I'm the partner who has been betrayed, I need to know the scope of the problem. For example, I need to know if our finances were used or were compromised as part of this addiction. I need to know the frequency and how this ebbed and flowed during the timeline of our marriage, because that gives me back my agency, my choices back, because I'm no longer making decisions about my life, my relationship with you based on a lie. But now based on like the full truth of what was going on. So those kinds of details are all super relevant to a full disclosure.
Yeah. So then there's like the traumatic imagery, which
Yeah.
is like a different beast altogether.
Yeah, so that's the graphic detail of the addiction. And it's like the specific names of performers or descriptions of exactly what was being watched, detailed genres, storylines, body parts, that kind of stuff. Giving those details doesn't help the partner heal, we find. It actually does the opposite. It implants those images into the partner's mind. And now when they close their eyes, they're seeing what the addict saw or what they think the addict saw. That creates a PTSD-like response that can haunt them for years. And I even actually was on Reddit the other day looking at a forum where partners are talking about life after disclosure and discovery. And one of them had started looking at porn to try to understand what he was seeing. And she had become hooked to that. She couldn't stop. And it wasn't even like she was getting a sexual hit out of it, but it had definitely created a compulsion in her. That's probably a case of what we call like traumatic reenactment. Like I don't know the full story
like
there.
It's a protective
Like
compulsion.
I need to know the enemy so I can destroy the enemy, but now like I'm in the hit of trying to solve the problem, right? Which is super tragic. So please trust us when we say that more is not better.
I think we need to acknowledge that most people want more. Most people want, because they're like, I can't heal unless I know every single detail.
Yeah.
So what do you say to that?
Yes. I say that I can understand why you feel that way. And we've never seen that work out well for people.
Yeah.
And it's likely just due to the fact that you haven't sort of fully understood that this is a traumatic event in your brain and that trauma doesn't get resolved by facts.
No. But fact finding is a protector.
Is an attempt to resolve the traumatic loop that you can't get out of.
Yeah. It's protecting me from the pain.
Yes.
If I can figure everything out, that's easier than sitting in the pain.
Yeah. It's kind of like in our family once someone had like some spots around their mouth and they were putting ointment on it and they were trying for 2 or 3 months. And in the end, the doctor said, actually, the thing that you're doing is what is stopping the healing, even though that's what seems what you'd be logical to apply to that problem.
Yeah.
And so we needed an expert to tell us like, hey, like, I get why you're doing that, but it's not going to help.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we hope you hear us saying that gently here today. Yeah. Our goal for a disclosure is to provide like a factual reconstruction, not graphic description. So frequency of behavior, escalation over time, especially details about how it was hidden, the gaslighting tactics that were used to cover it up. We want the addict really to blow the lid more on the secrecy and lies than the content itself. And that's often, if you think about where a lot of the injury comes from. Not to say the other isn't impactful, but
and then they can't use that anymore.
Yes. They're telling on themselves. They're disclosing their little black book
so
of how
they're
they
giving up their secrets
Yeah.
in that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is good for them too.
Yeah. So let's get into the actual checklist here. So the first major section that needs to be disclosed is the timeline. So why is it so important, Caleb, to go all the way back to the beginning?
Well, like I say, there is always an ebb and a flow of these things related to addiction. And part of the advantage of seeing when it started, it's almost always long before the relationship began. And that's actually a huge relief for many betrayed partners because it reinforces that this isn't your fault. It isn't a reaction to you, the pornography use, for example. It's something that the addict brought into the marriage. It was pre-existing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
almost like, if not 100% of the time, like 99% of the time,
it started earlier.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we're also looking for like peaks and valleys, stressors or triggers that exacerbated or escalated the behaviors.
Exactly. And I mean, this can be like hard too, especially if it escalated around times like childbearing. Like easy for that to feel like it's reflecting on you. But we want to map this out chronologically. Maybe it was once a week in 2018, but then after a job loss in 2020 or during the pandemic, maybe it became daily, that kind of thing. Understanding like those triggers for the addict or cues for the addict helps them to understand and create a relapse prevention plan. And it helps the partner understand that the behavior wasn't random too, but that it was a coping mechanism for internal pain or stress that they weren't able to take to healthy sources. Should have, didn't. And hopefully that also takes some pressure off the responsibility of the partner. So for example, like, well, it's easy to internalize, like the childbearing moment is my body wasn't available, or I wasn't enough for him, or just the deep betrayal of like, we were doing this new thing over here and you were detached. That's like, all that pain is so real, but to begin to understand, okay, like he was unprepared for this, and we have to take care of that unpreparedness so that when we have another child, or we have a job loss, or someone's parent passes away, that you have the resources so I can trust that you know what to do with your loneliness, pain, whatever stress you're feeling when we get to those moments. That's how the timeline can help.
Yeah. It increases the agency because we now have something to do, to work on, to, yeah. So I'm curious how this is landing for you as you listen. Like, I know that the topic of disclosure can be super sensitive. And while we have general recommendations, it's often very nuanced from couple to couple. So if you're comfortable sharing, what was helpful for you in the disclosure process? What was unhelpful? Or if you have questions for us, please drop these in the comments. We try to respond to them all.
Yep.
Okay, back to the checklist.
So moving along, we also have to address the financial and digital side in the disclosure too. So this is often where the most deception happens. We need a full accounting of direct spending, if there was any at all. Like, there's a lot of free stuff out there too, but if there was spending, accountability and transparency around that. That means like subscriptions to cam sites or any platform where money was exchanged for content.
And it's not just the amount of money.
Yeah.
It's like, it's the effort in hiding what they were doing.
So the methods of concealment often come into play here as well when we're talking about telling on ourselves. Was there secret credit cards? Was there cryptocurrency involved? Or was there use of cash, getting a buddy to pay for it, whatever it might have been, anything that was used to hide the paper trail. And then also, speaking of trails, like the digital footprint, so burner email addresses, secret social media profiles, hidden folders on devices, how you covered your tracks comes into the disclosure. Every secret account and tactic that you keep or that stays hidden is a barrier to intimacy.
Yes.
Bringing them all into the light is like dismantling a wall between you and your partner. Difficult, terrifying, necessary.
Hurtful. Yeah.
Hurtful.
Yeah.
Definitely necessary. And definitely better to do all at once than to trickle it out.
Yeah. So then the next section is behavioral patterns and locations. So this seems like it could be very triggering for a partner because it involves like the physical spaces that they share.
Yeah, it can be very difficult, but again, the goal here is shared reality.
Yeah.
If you were viewing pornography in the bathroom while your partner was in the next room, or on a work laptop while you were traveling, those are the moments when the deception was active. And disclosing these locations helps the partner make sense of those times when they felt you were distant, or where things just felt off, like the little flag was waving for them.
It also helps with like setting boundaries for the future, doesn't it? Like knowing which devices or areas of the home are high risk.
Yeah, absolutely. So like if a vehicle was a primary location, then we know we need accountability structures for your commute, maybe. I work from home, so I don't even know how to say that word. If it was a specific gaming system, then that device needs a filter or needs to be removed even, at least for a period of time. Something needs to happen. So we're using the data from the past to build a safer future. And to be clear, of course, when I say we in this section, I mean the addict and their therapist. We don't want the couple's relationship to shift into like policing or a parole officer dynamic. The addict has to own their sobriety. They have to be fully in charge of that. And the partner has to own their safety and their boundaries and be fully in charge of that and their healing. The addict doesn't get to tell the partner that they're safe now.
Right.
Okay.
They have to show it.
The addict has to prove themselves trustworthy through reliable behavior over time. And likewise, the partner may desperately want to control the addict's behavior so that they can be safe. But really, you can't do that all the time, everywhere. You can't be in all the places. So while there might be a period of increased transparency, which is really good, the recovering addict has to fully own their accountability to give the transparency and to commit fully to radical and complete honesty.
Yeah. But the final piece of the checklist is fantasy. So this feels like a gray area for many people. How do we disclose internal thoughts without crossing that line into traumatic imagery?
Traumatic imagery, yeah. So it's,
Help us understand that.
again, best here, Verlynda, to focus on the history and frequency of it rather than the content of
Okay.
the fantasy. We want to know what percentage of masturbation was derived from fantasy versus pornography. It's also, I think, useful to disclose at a basic level, like, was it romanticized fantasy, like a story about being in love or falling into love or being cared for or nurtured? Or was it just like a sexualized fantasy, like a particular sexual script or that plays out?
So not what that particular script was, but just
No.
that it was a script,
Yeah.
a sexual script versus a
Yeah.
romantic. Okay.
Yeah. That'll help you make sense of your partner's life, your addict partner's life. And like, this is very relevant to their childhood always, and to their healing journey. And we keep the focus on the behavior of fantasizing as a coping mechanism rather than the actual scripts of the fantasies themselves. So we want to provide the partner with an understanding of their internal world, the addict's internal world, without forcing you as the partner who has been betrayed to visualize things that will hurt you. So what we want to watch for here is that if the addict loses access to pornography, that they don't just switch over to fantasy.
Yeah.
And keep going too. That's the other part of making sure that fantasy is part of this discussion.
That's still a boundary to intimacy. It's still a wall.
Yeah.
Between you.
You don't want to just go from actual images like to imagined. Imagined ones. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or memorized ones.
Yeah. So, Caleb, as we wrap this up, we need to talk about emotions. So for the person disclosing, the shame can be paralyzing.
Yeah.
They often think they're protecting their partner by staying silent or minimizing what they're sharing.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's a bit of a lie here. Like, you aren't protecting your partner by withholding the truth.
Yeah.
Easy to believe that, but it doesn't work. You're protecting yourself. Really,
Yes.
is what's happening.
Yes.
You're protecting yourself from the consequence of the truth being known. Letting your partner believe a lie about your shared life together is a form of abuse because it's withholding information from them that they are owed so that they can have agency. You're taking power away from them that is their right to have. True protection and care is giving your partner the dignity of the truth so that they can choose for themselves how they want to live. Terrifying? Yes. But shame always wants you to minimize and hide, but that's going to perpetuate the addiction. Recovery requires you to step into the light even when it's uncomfortable to the point of being terrifying.
Yeah. And for the partner, the overwhelm is real. Like, the first 72 hours after disclosure are intense.
Super intense, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that depends a little bit sometimes, Verlynda. Like, often in the realm of pornography disclosures, most of the behavior is known by the time the full disclosure happens, and that just sort of becomes more of a validating event.
Okay.
Okay. Other times it can still be, though, really, really hard, as you've identified. We always tell partners to have like their therapist on standby, to have like a safety plan or like a self-clear plan at the very least of what you're going to do, what your timeline for a few days is going to look like, maybe some meals in the freezer or plans to go out for dinner with a friend or over to a friend's for dinner, some like support, right? You may need physical separation for a few days. You might need a friend to stay with you. It's not a failure of the process. This is a healthy response to a major emotional event. You're taking care of yourself. Super important, very essential. Disclosure should be the beginning of a healing process and not the end of one, right? So that's a way to think about this.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but we shouldn't underestimate it, though.
No, for sure not. Like formal disclosure is one of the hardest things you will ever do, but it's also one of the most courageous, I would say. It's the moment you decide that your relationship and your integrity as an addict are worth more than your secrets. It's the foundation on which everything afterwards is built. It's like a baseline, a new baseline for truth in your relationship. And so it needs to be done thoughtfully and thoroughly and gently. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So if you're watching this and you realize that you need professional help to navigate this process, whether you're the one preparing to disclose or the one who needs support after discovery, like please know that our team is available to you for counseling via Zoom video call. You can visit therapivo.com to learn more about our specialized approach, and we have a link in the pinned comment where you can book a free consultation to talk about your specific situation.
And remember, you don't have to do this alone. Taking that step to bring everything into the light and seeking the support you need and making sure that there's also care for your partner in this process, that's exactly how we normalize therapy, even through a difficult situation like this.